Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the latest Alex G record, God Save the Animals. God Save the Animals is the latest studio album from Alex G, the critically beloved singer-slash-songwriter who's known for a sort of DIY homegrown aesthetic throughout his music, with genres spanning the realms of indie rock, indie folk, indie pop music, even electronic music from time to time. He really does experiment with a lot of different sounds and has become a favorite of the singer-songwriter community and the indie music community for a pretty good reason over the years. God Save the Animals was a record that I intended to listen to the same week it came out or somewhere around there, but I just never really got around to, in all honesty. I mean, I kind of got caught up in the barrage of releases that happens every single year, and I just didn't quite find time for God Save the Animals between records that I felt were bigger and more important to cover, or records that I personally found to be more interesting that I figured I would have more to say about. I just didn't really have enough time for God Save the Animals in my recording schedule. But now it's the end of the year, and I mean, look, December, it doesn't really have a lot of new releases coming out, even less releases that are actually worth talking about. And it's a good time for me to actually take a look back on records that I missed but wanted to hear throughout the year. God Save the Animals is one of those, of course, and now here I am finally lending it an ear, and I certainly don't regret it. Alex G has always been very much known for his emotional performance style, but with that being said, I really do think you can make a solid case for God Save the Animals being the most directly emotive record that he has put out to date. He's always been rooted in a more generalized sort of rawness, thus his constant tagging of a quote-unquote bedroom musician, like I mentioned before, but the fullness of God Save the Animals as a record, both in the compositions and lyrical department, ultimately results in something that feels somewhat more impactful than a lot of his lo-fi work that he's put out in the past, like DSU. That's not to discredit his prior work, but I really do feel like the more fleshed out style that is being presented on God Save the Animals really does allow the emotional qualities of Alex G's work to shine through just that much more. It really does feel like Alex put a lot of his heart and soul into the making of this record, and that's something that I want to give him credit for as well, because let's face it, he's doing late night talk shows now, he's getting albums that chart on at least the American Billboard charts. Overall, he's reaching a point where he's just a few inches away from mainstream success, or about as close as you can get to mainstream success while still being an alternative artist. And at this point in his career, there would be a lot of other artists in similar positions that would just drop whatever they felt was necessary in an attempt to continue to strive for commercial success, but that really doesn't feel like that's the case on God Save the Animals. I mean, sure, this is something that is more commercially applicable, without a doubt. I mean, look, this sounds more professional, it sounds cleaner, but at the same time, it still does feel emotionally impactful and honest and genuine. And although I do have some complaints about it not necessarily feeling like Alex in his most natural form, which is something I'll talk about in a moment, I do genuinely feel like he put a lot of heart into this record, and for that, I commend him. Now, this is also the first studio album that Alex has ever recorded in a professional recording studio, and if you don't know why that's a big deal, that's because all of his work in the past has been entirely based around his literal bedroom. He is a definitive bedroom musician because of that. He has been a DIY homegrown musician since the start, and it's only until this record that he has kept that title over time, but now he's working in a collaborative stance with Jacob Portrait of the group Unknown Mortal Orchestra to produce this record, God Save the Animals, a, again, much more fleshed out and professional sounding record overall, and it definitely shows in the listening experience. Now, I'm gonna be totally honest, there are times where God Save the Animals does not actually feel like Alex G. I mean, sure, it's obviously directly related to things that he's done in the past, but at the same time, it kind of feels like something that's different, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but it just doesn't necessarily feel like it has the same immediately recognizable identity that his prior works that he has put out have had over the years, but that's just the natural way of artistic progression. Things will change, artists won't feel like they once did, and all I'm saying is just take that for what you will. Something that feels much more important to talk about in regards to God Save the Animals is its pacing overall. It starts out very strong with tracks like Runner being absolute highlights on the record, but it pretty quickly loses steam, and a good portion of the record, primarily the midsection, specifically the third quarter of the record, kind of feels like it doesn't have nearly as much energy or as much inspiration being put into it, and the record doesn't pick back up, unfortunately, until its final 2 tracks. And it really is a shame, because it does, to an extent, feel like it holds back what could have been a major moment of artistic growth for Alex as an artist, but still, it doesn't make the record bad or anything. The highlights are still absolutely fantastic. The highs are high, and the lows are still decent. There's not a bad track on this album. But nonetheless, it does feel like there was a missed opportunity to make one of the most directly impactful records of his career, and instead it's just a very good one. So, overall, God Save the Animals is a good record overall. I will admit that it does feel like Alex G is slightly losing his pretty distinctible identity, but at the same time, I kind of get it, really. I mean, it's artistic growth. No one can stop that, especially not from someone who is as genuinely creative as Alex G is. And even though I don't love this record, I do hope that he continues to pursue professional recording studios in the future, as it could definitely lead to some fantastic records, and maybe even the best record of his career, depending on what he chooses to do from a creative standpoint. But as it stands, God Save the Animals isn't really even a top 3 Alex G record, but nonetheless, it's a good one that's pretty admirable, and I do recommend it if you do find at least some interest in anything that I've talked about in this video. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.